I mean, if she can, that's fine.
So why don't we get started? All right.
Just read all. Yeah.
We want to start with a roll call? Or do I need to do anything for the call to order? Item
You just call to work.
call to order.
Our secretary is not here, so excuse. Roll call.
All right, so Kathy is present. Chris Wilson is present. Frank Falcone is present. Donna present. Rosario. And not present is Tiffany. And who else do we have?
Ken.
Hmm?
Ken.
Yeah,
Three strikes.
and Ken is not present.
I think he's out.
All right, we'll amend it to allow for Tiffany being here.
It's okay.
We were just finishing up roll call and
My job.
everybody but Ken is here today.
Okay, thank you. Wow. But not you.
Now that you've settled down, we could do a moment of silence in the pledge. So you can stand back up.
Oh.
Who's leading the pledge? It isn't me.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. All right, do we wish to approve today's agenda? Everybody had a chance to take a look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then can I motion that we approve the agenda?
I make a motion that we approve the agenda.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right. We do have a public today, and we do have an option to do a public comment before we start. Although I think,
I would make a recommendation unless they're here to speak about something that's on the agenda that's not one of the properties that you're looking at. Because at that time, they would have a chance to talk about it for one of the properties. But if it's something else that's on your agenda, then I would take comment. But if it's related to one of the properties, I would think it would be easier for you if it held off until at the time in which you talk about it.
that's what I was hoping we would do.
Unless the other gentleman is public comment.
All right, then we have two previous minutes that we hope to approve here, which would be February and March, since we did not approve February's minutes in March. Anybody want to make a motion to approve both of it, one or both of those?
I make a motion to approve the minutes as they were.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, minutes are up. We have a note here to discuss presentation documents for the Board of Supervisors. I think we have discussed that a little bit in the past. Was there any movement on the document that we had proposed?
There's no changes recommended from your document.
From this.
Okay, so for the document that I gave you last month, if we make the amendments to it that we talked about, we should be good.
I think you'd be fine.
All right. Then I don't know that we need to take any action on 7.1. Which takes us to 7.2, which is discussing discussing 3523 Goshen Road as a class 2 resource, and we're discussing what's going on with it as well.
I think that's, yeah. I have the position on my phone. So, hi, you can, you did receive the application for the historic resource inventory. And were you objecting to that at this point, or is this to present just the addition? Yes, you can, yeah.
Okay. So it's
Thing turns green.
okay, there we go.
If you,
Okay, so I think it's both. So just, hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Christina Townsend. My husband and I, and our 2 daughters reside at 3523 Goshen Road. Love the neighborhood, moved here about 10 years ago from New York, and having both grown up in historic homes, fell in love with this property when we moved in. Our daughters go to school around the corner at Episcopal, and as you can imagine, as they're getting a little older, we decided we need a little space, additional space. So there are 2 things that, and I'm going to follow your lead, I've never done this before, that we wanted to discuss. One was the project that we started on, and to preserve the home and all the authenticity, we have been working with Period Architecture, who's here this evening, as well as Devon Construction. That is all of the different things that you see here, I guess, on the screen. So we started the project with the goal of just basically adding some space, living space, and a garage and a mudroom off of what was an addition to the house in the back, and making sure that we preserve everything about the beauty of the property. So one thing, to your point, Kathy, was the permits that we've brought forth to get approval on. And then subsequent to submitting those permits, we did receive the letter around the level 2 resource. And so our ask, or my ask, is to consider both of these things. We'd love to get the approval on the permits to move forward with the project, and also are more than amenable to go forward with the level 2. I'm hoping I'm using the right terminology, resource, but want to make sure that we're moving along with both pieces of this, since we started the project, a few months ago, and now we just want to move hopefully forward with the permits, while also amenable to approving of the level 2 resource.
do we need to?
I think it would be helpful
Do you want me to give you?
for you to go ahead, since the property owner's in favor, or
Yes.
at least doing that, I think it would be helpful for you to go through and talk about which ones of the criteria the property meets, and put on the record, so you have it on the record that about that, so that when you present that to the board, even though the property owner is supportive, you need to at least know why is it, what is it that makes this property be a class 2 resource?
Okay, trying to find.
Kathy, do you want to do that, or do you want Frank to do that?
Well, either, I was just looking for my application that Heather had sent me. Basically to that the criteria is on the back. So I wanted to make sure I was addressing the correct criteria that we fit. Okay, here it is. So when we classify as a class 2 resource, we have criteria, and you probably looked at the application, and on the back, it would tell which one. It only has to meet one of those. And the, I refer to it as the Haitian house. So just so everybody knows, that's what we're talking about. Felt it met at least 5. So the property is of significant character, interest, or value as part of the development, heritage, cultural characteristics of the township, which it obviously is. It's one of our older homes, I think one of the oldest. Early federal house, estimated, they think it built in the 1700s. The Delaware County Planning Commission, along with the Pennsylvania Historic and Museum Commission, did a resource inventory in 1984, and it's been placed on that. So that is what we use as a guide, because that was thoroughly researched, and with money from the Department of the Interior, they got grants. So that not all the properties that we have in Newtown were surveyed then, but there were probably 80 or 90 that were. So the Haysham House was one of those. And for many of the reasons that it had remained to have the interior original random and pegged floors, original glass that were beautiful wainscot fireplace with pilaster on the first floor. They go into the details of the home and the inside and the exterior, which has been kept preserved. So I hate to go through all these criteria as my thing keeps going off. So I'm just going to go through the other. It's associated with an event of importance to the history of the township, county, and it had an association with the mills and the person who lived there with the mills, and Newtown had quite a few down where the paper mill house is our main historic center. That was a mill, and there were woolen mills and sawmills. And one of the owners, and I believe the builder was associated with that. And we go down to the property as part of or related to a commercial center, park, community, or other distinctive area, which should be preserved according to a historic, cultural, or architectural motif. And really, when we say it's not really a park or at that part, we use the community. It is a well-known spot in the community. Everyone knows it. It's part of the community and part of that district, actually. Even though we have not designated a historic district, Goshen Road, as you follow it across 252 and you follow North Newtown Street Road, has multiple historic homes. That was the center of Newtown Square for many years. So that and the further down on North Newtown Street Road. So it's very familiar to the community, and it was part of the origins of Newtown Square. So that's where. And it owes its unique location or singular physical characteristic representing an established and familiar visual feature of the neighborhood, which I basically just went over. And just remember that we always mark them all off, but they only have to meet one. So generally they easily do that. And it exemplifies the cultural, political, economic, social, or historical heritage of the community, which it does, and part of the history of our community, which is old. And I always say the oldest township in Delaware County. So it was established 1681. So we have some of the oldest homes in the county. And that is the criteria that we chose. And again, because it's in the inventory, the status of it goes up.
And not just, we've only been here 10, 12 years. Obviously, the house has been here that whole time. This is just, these things come about after, like, I guess a regular review is, would prompt this request for us to come here.
You mean?
Oh, just meaning why now were we?
Oh, why were you contacted now?
Yeah.
Yes, so to give you some background, that day, I didn't really have time to do that, but we passed a historic ordinance.
Okay.
2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, which established the Historic Commission.
Got it.
In our ordinance, we covered 5 of our nationally registered sites. We did not cover the 100 remaining sites. So part of the job of the Historic Commission is to enter and apply for each one of them individually, and then hold hearings and discuss with the homeowner or the owners that we want to put them in the ordinance. And we're starting, most of them are in the inventory, so that's pretty much the guide. So that is what just happened. And as we go down the list, and I usually use the book as a guide, or I use main roads and homes that are familiar to people. And truthfully with yours, I did see the sign go up with the construction. So I thought maybe I should enter theirs in.
Yeah.
And it said, and I read it, it said period, I think, architecture and Devon construction. So, and I had looked those up, so I knew.
We were dealing with experts. Oh, no, that's very helpful. And thank you for going through all those things. And it is a memorable house to me too. In fact, it's like when I drive by, it's like, that's my house with a barn, and it's old and I love it. I guess the only question I had back to the process, I guess, is related to the fact that we are amenable to this level 2. However, it is my understanding that if we were a level 2 at the time the permits were submitted, there may be a different process or set of criteria. I just want to make sure that going forward with a level 2 doesn't hold up the
Yeah.
permits that were previously submitted. But again, I don't know the process.
So if the commission tonight were to say that they support your project, based on what you've submitted,
Okay.
it would go back to our zoning officer, and our codes enforcement officer, who would then, who's also our, building person. So he would go through it. He would evaluate the project and make sure, in fact, I think he already has, he's waiting on tonight,
Tonight,
is my
okay.
understanding.
Okay.
But he would go through and make sure that it meets all the codes and all of those kind of things. Because obviously, if you're adding, you have to do, that's the other side of this, you have to do that. And then, that part of it could move forward,
I see.
okay?
Okay.
I don't think it has any other requirements to go before anybody else.
Okay.
If the commission were to decide that they want to move forward with the class 2, which I'm assuming they want to, since they're the ones that are bringing it, that would go to the Board of Supervisors. We would put in the report that you spoke in favor of actually having the house on the class 2 registry. Then it would go to the Planning Commission, as well as the Delaware County Planning, the Township's Planning Commission and Delaware Planning Commission. Because it's actually a map amendment change, because our historic properties are not, we don't have a downtown center that all the historic properties are. Our historic properties are literally spread throughout the entire town. And so we have to do a map amendment change for each one. And so that becomes a public hearing. So it would go to Planning Commission, both planning commissions, they would make a recommendation of whether or not they thought the map ought to be changed to include that property. That would be then referred back to the Board of Supervisors. When the Board of Supervisors is ready to hear the case for that, it would actually be a full public hearing. There'd be a court stenographer who would record the hearing process. And at the end of that, assuming there was no objection and the board agreed, or even if there was an objection and the board still felt that it was a class 2, it would then be, the map would be amended to include that property as a class 2.
I see.
So
Okay.
that process probably takes another 90 to
Separate.
160 days. Your process, for the purpose of moving your permit forward, I think as long as the commission were to agree tonight, we could take it back to the, like I said, our building codes officer. He would be able to do the sign off. I don't know exactly where the permit is, but then it should be able to be released.
Okay.
So you can move forward.
You can move both things in parallel.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
They're separate.
Okay. I just
That
wanted-
process, your process with the building will be much faster than the process getting the class 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for clarifying all that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So given that, we have the two things to vote on. Are there other discussions we want to have? I mean, I think we've all looked at the
I don't know if they want to
drawings.
present anything and you feel they need.
What, do you want to present anything specifically about the construction, just so it's on the record of what you're going to do? If I can have you speak at the mic, only because the meeting's recorded and if somebody wants to listen.
Or can you hear me okay? I'm Todd Major from Debbie Construction. I'm just trying to say the process, and I apologize because I just been a little bit kind of backwards. I served on a lot of boards for a long time, Historic Commission, Harbs, chairman, whole 9 yards. But I feel like our permit was being held hostage. So, and I know this process and everything else. We applied way back at the beginning of February. And here we are. Then also we kind of got blindsided with this, which is fine. I think it's great. It's certainly a good opportunity for you to get this property, which is wonderful as a class 2 historic resource. But I guess
we have anything to present though. Do we have?
no.
I mean, I think what would be helpful if you took a very quick, 3 or 4 minutes and just talked about the addition that you were going to put on, how it would match similar architecture to what you have today. And
Okay.
I think the advantage of that is that the commission, when it takes an action, can say, we've heard, and we know they can, I mean, just to have an idea of what you're doing and how you're maintaining what you have. Because you've said that that's what you want to do, but I think it's just important that they hear it.
Yeah.
And then when they vote, then they can vote. It goes back to our, like I said, it goes back to our staff and they can take action.
My name's William Burke. I work with Period Architecture. I just wanted to talk about the addition to the house that is in question here. When designing the addition, we tried to keep true to a lot of the architectural details and kind of the originality of the historic structure. We matched in the addition, we matched window pane styles from 6/6 light divisions to match existing house lights already. We've also asked to match the structure, the shutter colors and finishes to match the existing historic structure. We've called out to match existing trim profiles and other aspects of the house that we felt kind of carried the integrity into the addition. The addition itself was mainly an addition because they needed the extra space for their growing family, and they kind of giving them a garage that they didn't have and a mudroom and kind of a better kind of workable space. But the addition is, and you'll see in the photos, is kind of step back from the structure. It doesn't compete with the main mass of the historic structure. It kind of sits back from the road, and most of the addition pieces are actually behind the existing house structure. So it's all kind of trying to be respectful to the original historic structure.
Does the commission have any questions that they would want answered before they would support or not support this moving forward?
I just wanted to say, in going through the plans, I'm a realtor and went through everything, and you did a fantastic job all the way through.
I looked at it and found nothing that would be offensive to the Historical Society. Everything was in line, everything was as it should be. I also was a historical contractor. I have a little bit of experience. It's beautiful. Thank you.
There's no other questions. Do we want to,
I would recommend you take two separate votes.
yes.
Okay.
Separate issues, separate votes.
Yep.
Anyone want a motion? Either of the issues?
I'll motion that we recommend for class 2 historic resource, the Haysham House.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll make a motion to approve the architectural designs and plans for the addition.
I would second that.
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Then it seems we have approved both things and should be good to go.
Appreciate it. It's nice to see everyone.
Well, thank you
Meet
guys for
everyone.
coming
Thank
out,
you.
Jonathan.
Yes, appreciate it.
So Andy should be reaching out to you for next steps. Okay, if you don't hear from him in a couple days, reach out, just follow up, but I will let him know that it was approved tonight.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, I will have to stop by. I don't have your email. Okay.
All right, in old business, we have a discussion and possible action on reassigning subcommittees. We want to do that first, or do we want to do that after?
I would do that.
Yeah. let's
Do that at the end?
Yeah.
All right. So then let's move past 8.1 and move on to 8.2, which is the discussion of the possibility of recommending the James Price House for Class 2 resource. I see we have the letter here from Dr. Giacomo from the last meeting. Do we need to do anything to add that into the record or?
I think it would be helpful to add it in the record because you didn't actually have an official meeting last
Mhm.
time. You just allowed her to read the letter.
Mhm.
I would, for the record, make note that she had read it in at the last meeting. But that you are, you're accepting that as her comment. And then if you wanted to, you could make a recommendation just to accept her letter as a whole I normally wouldn't accept a letter as a whole, but because we didn't want to make her come back,
Mhm.
I think you could accept her letter as a whole as in.
I would be happy to motion that we accept the letter as it was read to us by Dr. Giacomo last meeting.
And everyone has seen it.
Say again?
Everyone received the letter. Some
Everyone,
people-
yes, everyone here has received the letter. Does anybody want to second that?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
I,
So then, do you want to briefly cover the points as to what makes this meet our criteria for a class 2 resource? Since we did that, I think way back when, but we
Yes,
have,
we
we have not
did.
done it recently since we resubmitted this.
Okay,
Or since we actually submitted this, because I don't think we ever heard it the first time. We decided to table it.
oh, you're right. So the James Price House, one of the oldest houses in Newtown Township, built circa 1700 to 1703. I know for sure the one piece of the home was built in 1710. Part of a William Penn land grant. And the early documents point to James Price as being the builder. It's built in the English cottage tradition. It contains multiple fireplaces, heavy timber lintels and traces of beehive ovens, small windows, narrow spiral stairs, random width floors. So inside it's maintained as it was.
Mhm.
And just with minor, and I did tour it on Sunday. So, I'm going to read from here. Again, the property is number one. I don't know if you all have copies. Significant character and interest or value as part of the development, heritage, or cultural characteristics of our township, which it is. And it sat at the corner, and on that property was also a general store and the first post office, I do believe, called St. David's Post Office. And there's ruins on the property of that still intact. And obviously it's also in the inventory from the Delaware County Planning Department, the 1984 inventory. It is related to a commercial center, park, or community or other distinctive area which should be preserved according to the historic, cultural, architectural motif. And I can get into all the architecture, but it was, that still remains and part of the community. It's been there or sits on the corner. It's in a historic, I would say, one of our historic districts, if you can go that far. The street up to the wheelwright shop
Mhm.
and then down Newtown Street Road, there's another setback if you cross the circle. So well known by all who pass it. Property owes its unique location or singular characteristic, representing established and familiar visual feature of the neighborhood, community, and township. Obviously, it does, and exemplifies the cultural, political, economic, social, or historical heritage of the community. Which again, it does, as being one of the first homes here. And does anybody have any questions about it?
Age-wise in relationship, how does the barn relate to the house?
Well, the barn is part of the original.
Part of the original?
Homestead, yes.
The exterior siding had been replaced a number of years ago. And to stay in with the historical thing, they just let it age.
Okay. I was just curious because this is kind of a twofer with both of them there.
Yeah, it had several additions. 1810, there was a 2.5-story section that was added. The earliest is the back kitchen, which remains at 1710. It's a small kitchen, and it's as it was. It was not used as their kitchen. Their kitchen was a more modern one. And actually, the property, obviously 2 years ago, was inspected. I did speak with Ray Giuliani Jr. Because he lived there till his father passed away and the house was sold. So the inspection, as he's pointed out, if anybody, she has the inspection, that it was inhabitable, obviously, and it passed all the inspections. And any minor details that they had to fix, they did. So the house is in livable condition. Quite easily, actually. And it is 1.5 acres, not subdivided. Only one property can be owned.
So Dr. Giacomo has made it quite clear that she would prefer us not to approve this as a historical resource. Although, given what the building is and where it is, I don't see how we don't.
Well, no, actually what we are doing is designating a historic home and it fits all the criteria. There's no argument against this being historic. So I don't see how that's relevant.
But I would like to add also that in the letter which I read, she points out a restriction and limitation on the interior of the house, which is not part of the preservation ordinance, right?
Yep.
We don't deal with that anyhow. So I think that she misguided in her reading of what this does. Perhaps someone should reach out to her and explain that she can not, the ordinance doesn't go into the inside of the house. You don't have a say into that,
No, and actually,
unfortunately.
I think they
In
maybe
some
are
way.
aware of that because the gentleman who showed the house had plans to show where you could add on. And he had them there. Should a prospective buyer want to know
Yeah.
how you, or where you could add, he was showing them what
Yeah.
could be done.
Oh,
So I think they must know that that can be, and so he's showing an option. If
Right.
it seems too old, the kitchen is dated.
right.
So he
right,
was
I
put a
understand.
kitchen addition, he's in keeping with the historic
Okay.
aspect of it, so they are aware of that.
And right now, the property's for sale. But
Yeah.
it's also, there's some type of agreement with a builder to actually, it's being marketed by another realtor for Hellig's Builders to actually build a home there. But if that happens, I believe they plan on tearing down the house.
So it's marketed 2 ways, so,
It's marketed right now with 2 houses, even though there's no approvals for anything.
so they marketed the old, so when I went in, that was the historic part being marketed, the house.
One realtor has it listed to sell the house,
And then the other.
and another company has it listed somehow to sell it, putting 2 versions of the house there, and their plans are to, if they do that, they would plan on tearing down the house and keeping the barn supposedly.
Right, and he did mention that too, that,
Mhm. But I think that
build your house and tear it, and live in that while you build it. Is
Yeah.
pretty much how they're.
Yeah, or, there's a lot of houses where people will, build onto it. So I think even though it's close to the road, you could do something like the folks that were just in here, build behind it, build, if there could be maybe some type of, overlay to approve that to be maybe some type of a in-law quarters or something like that, with some kind of special zoning opportunity for historic houses that we could actually, be creative in the zoning to keep that house. So, and have the new construction house, be built back and around it.
But that's down the road, and our
Mhm.
recommendation is purely to say
Historic.
it's historic.
It is.
You buy it and then you follow through with whatever you need to do.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Because
Mhm.
any addition,
Mhm. Mhm.
goes to zoning regulation.
yes, they have to do it.
In the setback, property lines, distance from front and side yard, those go still fall into those regulations. It's
Yeah.
not our prerogative.
Well, but you can as the commission. I mean, one of the things that under your commission, underneath the ordinance, is you can make recommendations to the board for potential ways of allowing properties to
Adaptive use.
have adaptive reuse.
Mhm.
And so that would be something that you could recommend to the board, that if it's a historic property, even though we typically do not allow in-law quarters, would we allow in-law quarters in something that was a historic property so that a family could come in and do something different?
Mhm.
But keep that. So you could make that recommendation to the board. It would be probably separate from this application, in that you don't want to muddy the waters with two different things, but it could be something that you would recommend.
So maybe Kathy should explain people that working with this commission actually can work in their favor in many ways.
And I think
From
that's
what
already
you're
been on the
saying, I mean,
table.
it's favorable to them.
What's
That
the,
adaptive reuse has already been on the table, so it wouldn't be a strange recommendation on this one, since that was the original plan for this property when she bought it.
Yeah, that's, yes, she wanted to take it a little further than the board.
Did want to take it a little further, so it went around.
And as it stands now, the owner must live in that home because the footprint of whatever business or anything you do like that, if you wanted to have a small business or a small, I think I said art studio when I was there, you could sell your art, but you have to live in that home to then utilize as Ray did. And that was part of the problem too. They weren't
Yep.
going to be.
So do we want to move forward with making a recommendation on whether to approve this or not?
Yep.
I'll make a motion to,
Thank you.
sorry, to approve submitting the application for class 2.
I will second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All righty. Then that moves us to 3202 West Chester Pike. I believe everyone received a letter from the executor of this estate's lawyer, reiterating their position that they took in our previous hearing, that they also do not want this to proceed as a class 2 resource. And I kind of feel with this request, as with the previous request, it is specifically based on wanting to sell the property and not really addressing the fact of whether it is historic or not. Do you want to touch base on what the criteria we think it meets are?
So it's known, it's again on the Delaware County Planning Commission's resource inventory, so it's taken right from there. It's also in our book of tours of Newtown Square with a description of it. It's referred to as the Federal Stone House. So the criteria that I said it met, based on all the information, I think estimated 1813 for it being built, probably around 1800, possibly late 1700s. There's from just, I think, the detail inside, original random with flooring, pegged beams, log beams, metal hooks used for drying meat. There was a lot of intact and original things in that when they did this inventory as well. And at that time, it had kept most of its original features and charm, and by the exterior, it still has the same exterior features that it did when this inventory was done. So again, it's of significant character as part of the heritage or cultural characteristics of the township. It does sit right up at the road. One of the first things noticed when you come into Newtown from that way is that building. It embodies its distinguishing characteristics of an architectural style, which is the federal style, and a lot of the inside features that were noted in this inventory. They get very specific with 6.6 molded trim, lug sills, 3.3 eyebrows. They go through all these different pieces that were inside that were notable, and not all the homes have those. And it exemplifies the cultural, political, economic, social, historical heritage of the community. Their comment from the planning commission, when they put it in, just at the end said the house was built in 1813, possibly late 1700s, and has retained much of its original integrity. It is located on West Chester Pike, a major thoroughfare in Newtown's early development. Okay. That's pretty much it. And then Frank might want to say a few words.
Yeah,
About, he reported on, he did a lot of.
I'd be interested in Frank's opinion on the condition. Once you get through the overgrowth.
Yeah, once you get through it. But there was a picture from 20 years ago and it wasn't big trees, but that's 20 years ago, and now it's overgrown. The property itself is in, it is historic. It is in poor condition, but it is historic. Hasn't been maintenance done in 20 years, 25 years. So, you know, when they took the picture, it didn't look bad, but now the paint's peeling and it needs a lot of it. The roofing is the shingles on the ground.
Yeah, yep.
They're blown off the roof. That's the only way they get down. Design life is 18 to 25, and it's probably done with 25. But the building itself is still historical, it still be class 2. It's just that when they get it, there's a lot of maintenance
Yeah,
required.
this one definitely needs work. But as you point out, and as we point out, the condition of the building isn't entirely relevant to whether or not it deserves class 2 protection. Does anybody else have questions or thoughts on this particular house?
Why wouldn't it have class 2 protection? It's the age.
It's as easy as it gets.
Right.
And do we want to move forward on voting whether or not to recommend it for class 2 approval?
Mhm.
I would motion that we move forward with recommending it to the supervisors for class 2 protection.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Which brings us to a cute little spring house on Goshen Road.
Cute little spring house on Goshen Road.
Cute little spring house. And
It is cute.
it is.
It needs a roof too.
This is what's across the street from you, right? Yeah. Okay.
Who would have been notified?
It's owned by Spring Hills Lane.
Do we know? Who was notified about this?
My understanding is we determined that the homeowners association was,
Were they able to get them, though? That's the township did that.
do we
Oh, how often?
do we know whether a notification was successfully made for this?
At one point.
The spring house, the notification, someone was notified, and were they able to figure out who?
I'm not 100% sure. I do know they tried to know. I do know they tried to notify them. I believe I shared with them to notify the HOA. I'm not 100% sure they were able to do that, but I would assume that that was done. You could
Right.
act on the assumption that that was done. And then if we find out that it wasn't, it would come back to you.
Somebody has some pool equipments in that building inside. Pool equipments stored there in the bottom of the building.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a,
Check that one out too.
say it again.
Frank went to that one as
Yeah.
well.
I have a feeling we're not too far from recommending that whoever is in control of the spring house may want to replace the roof as well. But that's not for today.
Mhm.
Right.
Do you have information?
I wrote down that the roof has cedar and it's covered with moss. Ideally, you get rid of the moss, but that doesn't, there's no visible deterioration through the cedar shingles at this point.
Okay.
The exterior of the building is the same as it was. It's a spring house. There's a lot of water in the bottom of it. That's what it's supposed to. They have the proper ventilation. It's a beautiful little house. You can't live in it.
Make a nice little art studio though.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you've got a listing of what the criteria are.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the application for this one, but,
It's connected to
Oh,
the,
there-
it's connected to the house across the street, correct?
yeah, so it's really connected. It's a small spring house. Is part of the William Lewis House and Barn Complex. Presumably it was built during the early 18th century as the original section of the main house, dates to 1708. I know. Tell me the truth. I will update this, 1690. Yes,
The 1708 is the second edition.
that's what, okay.
They have that wrong.
We have to correct that.
So it used to be part of 4109 Goshen Road.
Mhm.
Somebody just bought
The
that.
transfer of the land from William Penn, with a copy of the. In the 80s.
Okay.
And yes, they built the cellar.
Right, and the entire complex served as an American outpost for intelligence officers during the Revolutionary War. It has a lot of history, and the
Okay.
spring house is part of that.
Mhm.
And that's why it's included as the three pieces, which we'll get to after that. And I think we noticed that it was in kind of not being tended to, so perhaps.
I have to say, what you must have noticed, there is a fireplace. There is a chimney.
Yeah.
Because
the first floor.
when they removed these outside steps,
Yeah.
there was like a little.
Yeah,
of
so the
this
steps.
spring house.
Mhm.
But when Spring House Lane was developed, they got to require those steps outside. For visiting. Of the people.
Yeah, I was wondering why that door was just floating.
Yes,
Makes more sense.
and you can see the
The
road.
picture, you have a picture there, on the steps.
Yeah.
Yeah, the steps are on there. Right. Same. Maybe I guess,
We got, you know, we had. We know we are. What's that, the Philadelphia story? We live in North End. And we had the 31 endangered servants,
how many?
31.
Oh, okay.
Time called the Bonkel and Charles, we had to develop this old language of. And so that's how that complex was built.
Right.
It was not built, I mean, endangered servants were like Thomas Massey. After eventually even get their way to the one who got to work
Pretty
and
cool.
pass it to pay back the
Mhm.
United States.
Anything else we need to discuss on this one? Again?
What numbers are they? Oh,
Number
oh,
one,
okay.
number 7, number 8, and number 10.
Make a motion?
I make a motion that we.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right.
I think that it's been out every day, at least I would say. That.
That's true.
Okay.
All right, then do we want to talk about what subcommittees we currently have open and how we want to reassign people to them or add them or discontinue them? We have a list of these? I don't.
Well, my subcommittee for the applications and doing it would be, it was Frank and I.
Me.
Oh, okay, so we're still. Right.
Unless anybody wants to jump on board.
I mean, we could go back through the early meetings and figure out what committees we have.
Well, yeah,
And
so
what
we had
committees
that
we
one,
need.
we had the outreach. We had the subcommittee for the budget, subcommittee for marketing material. I believe that was it.
Let's figure out who's on what committee and revisit them, revisit it next month. Cause I don't feel that we're organized enough to do that today. And we are getting short on time.
What kind of marketing, what type of marketing would you? need?
We had a couple
Materials?
of outreach committees, one that was specifically tasked to talking to other historic commissions, and one that was more focused on marketing or educating the community on what we actually do. I think the first of those we can probably discontinue, and the second one we probably have to reassign, because I think we have a number of members who aren't here anymore, and we have not assigned new people onto things, so we should probably try to do that in the next meeting. And maybe you and I talk during the month and bounce it back and forth.
If I come across any of the other subcommittees.
Um,
Other ones.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with the way we have Frank and I, and if you want to come off, you don't need to have us down, but that was fine. And with that, I don't need to change that one.
Yeah, but let's get an actual list of them so that we all
We may
have it.
have to change up the list,
Yep.
but we really.
And it's my understanding we may have some of these previously approved recommendations going to the Board of Supervisors this month.
I believe that's true.
Could we get a listing of what's going? And do we want to try and supplement those with some of the relevant information that we talked about adding to?
Yeah, I think that needs to happen before they go to the board. So
Okay.
that would be what we would need to do.
I think
Then
it's-
if we can get, just a listing of which ones are going in front of the Board of Supervisors, then we can work together as a group and get additional information filled out pretty quickly so that the Board of Supervisors has.
Well, you have the form that you created,
I do, I still need to, I'm gonna add in some additions.
and
that
we have the
talked about.
narratives. I believe it's Friends meeting and the mill workers house, because they were at the county and the county just signed off on them and should be coming back. So I think that's the two, because it's the only two that they've seen.
Well, that's the ones that are going to go before for the hearing, so that you want to go ahead and get your stuff together for those.
Yeah,
Do you know what the date is?
You've had some others that you've done that
right.
are not in that format. And so we need you to get those in that format so that I can present them to the board.
That's your question.
What is the date of that meeting, and when do you need that information formatted by?
The date of the next Board of Supervisors meeting is the 22nd. There's another meeting on May 13th. So I would need it by at least Wednesday prior to the meeting so that it can be reviewed before it goes on there.
So, yeah, I guess I was confused. It goes to the supervisors twice, which makes this confusing. The first one is just pass it along meeting.
But they want
So
to
that's this
see,
one you're talking
this-
about.
I'm talking, so you're talking about the one that the supervisors has already supported going to.
And we'll come back to them,
It will
yes.
come back to them.
Okay,
Once the planning
Okay.
commission and the Delaware County Planning Commission have reviewed it,
mhm,
will come back, there'll be an official hearing. At the official hearing, I would think somebody, because this committee is the one that's presenting it, somebody from this committee needs to be there to put on the
Mhm.
case as to why that property should be as a class 2 resource. They can go by your application, but I think.
and
that
those two were supported by the owners, so those two,
So
Yeah,
we've got
those
the
will
mill
be
workers.
easier.
yeah, that's why I'm thinking
So you're saying it's the mill workers and which one?
that's for the main one,
Friends meeting.
Friends meeting.
You said the zone mapping will be changed. How does it change? I mean, exactly. If they are nothing, then they remain nothing.
Yeah, no, so the way the zoning map reads right now for historic resources, there's 5. There's the 5 class 1 historic resources. And right now, there's nothing else listed on the map. If the board, or when the board takes action, each time that they take action on a property, that property then if they say yes, that property then gets added to the map, and that's the amendment to the map. So it's like an overlay. And the biggest issue is because there might be 3 properties that are historic together, and then there might be 50 properties in between that aren't, and then there might be another historic property. I mean, it's not like some communities you go in and the whole downtown is historic. We don't have that feel here, you know.
Right, I was trying to understand that the underlying zoning regulation which are in place now, like setback.
That doesn't change.
Let's remind where it is.
Yeah, so if it's in an R1, it's still an R1. If it's in an R3, it's still an R3. The only change happens now is that it becomes a class 2 or a class 1 resource, depending on what the process is. And if most of them will probably be class 2 the way we're doing it. So if it becomes a class 2, the real major change is that if somebody comes in and wants to demo it, it has to go through this process. Okay, that's the major change.
So Steve,
all right,
it's
so-
a quick question. So if what we approved tonight, if anybody puts a demo permit in tomorrow for those properties,
Yeah.
what happens?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is in limbo. We would probably ask them to please go through the process, but they wouldn't have to.
Do we need to inform the supervisors that we have approved these will be coming to you just to?
Well, I will let them know,
Okay.
and let them, particularly the 2 that we know that are for sale right now. I will let them know on those.
Mhm,
The other ones are not quite as, the one property, they're
Yeah,
they're very happy. I can't imagine that they're
Mhm.
gonna do anything.
mhm.
So, I
We're
mean,
good.
huh?
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're happy with the property. So I don't say anything there, but the 2 that are for sale, I could see something being done. In fact, I
Mhm,
know that somebody's wanting to do something
Mhm.
for the one on West Chester Pike that
mhm,
we've already told them no once.
mhm.
But it does, what they want to do doesn't meet zoning.
Yeah.
And so, but if they were to meet zoning, we would be hard pressed to say no.
Mhm.
All right, so for the April 22nd meeting, you need paperwork from me on the Mill Workers and Friends meeting by like Monday.
Well,
The
let me
15th.
say that the mill workers and the Friends meeting, I don't know if that I have to, Kathy, do you know, has that gone to the Township's Planning Commission, or was that on
Who
this?
would go first? It went to the county. Who goes first?
It doesn't matter. They go simultaneously.
So it did go to the county,
Yeah, I can't,
and I don't know. I never
think-
hear from the.
I
Newtown
want to
Planning
say,
Commission.
I thought that the Planning Commission meeting got canceled. So I don't think it was before then. So it'd have to go to Planning Commission first. If it goes to Planning Commission first, then I would say the 22nd is irrelevant, other than if you want 571 Newtown Street Road and 3201, somebody said 2, but whether it's 01 or 02, West Chester Pike, if you want the Board of Supervisors to take action to send that to the Planning Commission, because it's still, like, if they say yes on the 22nd, it won't be on the Planning Commission for the township until the end of May.
Okay, I just need to know which ones I need to get you.
Well, that's why I'm saying, that's why I was trying to give you.
All right, so you want those, you want those 2 are the most important.
If you're, as a board, want to take action on that direction, they would be the 2 most important. The other 2, because I would argue because the people want it, if you didn't get it till the May 13th meeting, I think you'd be really safe. But these 2 more likely could have an action taken
Mhm.
against them
Mhm.
if you're wanting to save them.
All right, I'm just a little unclear on the process, so I can get those, I can get those two done and to you relatively quickly because I should have all the info I need. And I'll follow up with you
And-
guys as needed.
Okay, and the supervisors have a copy of this on PDF.
Yep, but I have it digitally, so
No, I'm saying so
I
they
touched
can
the page.
reference these properties on here, when they get them in.
They can, but
They
the
will.
document that I'm putting together
Yes, you have to do that too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
includes that page as well, so that. All right, do you want me to email those to you and Heather when I have them ready?
Yes, please.
All right. Then I will start with those two and then work on all of them. And
And I will just give you the narratives.
what?
I wrote narratives.
That would be great. Yeah, if you could email those to me.
That's okay, great.
Then do we need to do anything else as far as what we want to talk about next month, or are we just going to work it out as we go? Because the only thing I see us carrying forward is the subcommittees.
Right, there's some unfinished things, but we should probably figure out what those are, like the amendments that we put in. And I asked for two things. I think to find out, is there a way to find out exactly where all the properties are in the process?
We're working on that. So,
So
I actually thought.
find them.
I thought there were actually 3 that were sent to the planning commission. So I need to verify what that is, and one was waiting for an updated script, so to speak.
Okay.
And so.
So for next meeting, we have discussion of subcommittees and status of current applications.
Yes, that's good. So I guess we need to know we had asked about being notified if any of the properties would be on the planning commission. Or are we just gonna have to look at the agendas? Because, I'm thinking the same issue that you're finding, if the supervisors don't have the information, the planning commission could say, well, we don't have the information, and then that
Yep.
cancels it again, and it can drag out longer. So
Yep.
is there a way we could be
I will
notified? Because I would
talk to
gladly
Heather.
go and
I will
bring
talk
the
to
info.
Heather about seeing about that.
Alrighty.
I think going forward, if we get this new form in place, you wouldn't submit it to us until you filled out the form that way. And
Right,
so it wouldn't be an issue of having to worry about it. The only reason why it's an issue is because this hasn't been done for the
Right.
prior ones.
Yeah, I foresee in the future filling out the shell of this form before we meet on the properties and then finishing it out that week and forwarding it to you guys. So that way it happens in a timely manner and there are no surprises.
so the only public hearings then, the planning commission does not hold one for these again? Am I right there?
What do you mean?
So the
They-
only public hearings on this property for this class 2 will be our public hearing and then the supervisor's public hearing. Otherwise, does it just go before the planning commission and people aren't notified again that that's on there, correct?
No, we'll let them know it's at the planning commission.
Okay,
And
so which means you could have ditto of this, people coming, saying the same thing,
Mhm.
which brings up, that's the problem. If we don't have someone there. And we don't have all this, and we can send them the information, but I'm gonna tell you, if you don't have someone at the meeting to dispute or to just explain that these people have already come before us, this is what we found, and, redirect them to what the true point is.
Yeah, I would imagine, at least in the short run, that we want to have somebody at any meetings to discuss any of
Any,
these.
yeah,
Yeah, I think the hardest one to be. Hold on one second, sorry. My phone's recording this. Trying to get it not to, thank you. I think the hardest one is the county planning commission, obviously, because I think they actually meet during the day. I don't think they meet at night, at least they used to meet during the day.
yeah, they do.
And so that's a little bit more difficult. That's why it's important that your sheet be well put together
Okay.
and that they be able to understand why you're wanting to do it the way you're wanting to do it.
Fair enough. Do we have anything else to discuss, or shall we motion to adjourn?
Anything else?
Just have one quick question. And I'm new to this, obviously, but and I understand the process that where you're in now, that things weren't, put in a couple of years ago in the system, they have to be sort of invited to go in. But is there a way that you can sort of come up with some type of measure that, okay, like houses that are at least 150 years or older are, sort of fast tracked or something like that? Because it's, some of these houses that we're looking at, these are 200-year-old houses here. It's sort of like obvious, but
And we've talked about this a little bit, whether we target the easy ones
yeah,
or the most at-risk ones
Yeah.
or the most deserving.
yeah.
And I don't know that we've come to a good,
Yeah.
a
I get
good plan.
Yeah.
But let me answer one part of this question I think you're
Okay.
asking, and I think the rest of the board's kind of heard me say this so many times that they just kind of know it. And
Give it to me.
and it's like, oh my gosh, he's gonna say this again.
Hmm.
But in order to do a zoning map amendment,
Mhm.
it has to be a full hearing and by the Board of Supervisors. And so the reason why these weren't fast tracked in the first place, the reason why the ordinance was set the way it was, and we have to do this,
Mhm.
is because each one has to be acted on individually. We would have to hold 100 hearings if we were just gonna say all the ones on this list
Mhm.
belong there. The board would be meeting for almost an entire month, just having hearings every night. And so what they wanted was really for this commission to come up with these are the most important ones. Let's get them on and then start working through the process and then keep adding as we go along.
So does a historic house in the township that has this classification, do they have a specific classification like, RH or whatever, like and are they taxed differently because
They're
they're
not taxed
historical?
differently. And that's part of the reason why I think some homeowners are reluctant, to be honest with you. Now, going back to, I think, the conversation that you guys had earlier, if you could come up with one or two kind of maybe conditional type things or special exception kind of things for a home to have that was in a neighborhood, then potentially you could give an incentive to being a class 2 resource, and you brought up the concept allowing an in-law quarters. We had talked at one point about allowing, do you allow, if there's 3 acres, do you allow a bed and breakfast? Or do like there's some possibilities like that you could present as zoning changes that you would think that would be help to have owners be more interested. I think the board was a little concerned just arbitrarily picking something because of what the issue at the property of 571 Newtown Street Road. If you said that it was allowed to be commercial, in that was not a low impact commercial thing. And the next door neighbor was like, I've got a multi-million-dollar home here. I don't want a commercial business right next door.
And commercial goes with the dirt, not with the house, right? So if the house ever burned down, that would still be commercial then.
That's correct. Although if you could make a zoning thing that's tied to the fact
The house.
that it has to be tied to the historic structure.
Okay,
And I think then if the historic structure went away, the zoning went away with it.
gotcha.
That's the reason why it's a zoning map change. So that for example, let's say that one of these houses is demolished for whatever reason, burned down, or whatever the reason being, we would probably go back and amend our zoning map and say it's no longer considered a historic resource because it's gone. And because it's no longer considered a historic resource, if the zoning was tied to the historic map condition, then it would go away with it.
I
That
definitely
makes
think
sense.
some kind of, like, just with the price points in town, some type of multi-generational housing, maybe you can't rent it, but you have to have a relation in the house, like some townships have that overlay on some type of property, whether it's attached or separate, that it would definitely be something that could be a plus.
Yeah, but one is still careful because the underlying zoning regulations name,
Mhm.
and you end up having a zoning board because you say, where I live,
Mhm.
in Airbnb.
No.
No, they wouldn't. And that's one of the reasons.
Absolutely, it would be an uproar.
Yeah.
No.
I really can't see any special privileges.
I read from you.
And that's why it didn't just go through with that in the first place. But if you all were to look at and see what the impact would be,
Mhm.
and as a realtor, you kind of understand that impact.
But that's why,
I would rent from
that's
you.
why putting them all. into
In-law
the
suites
ordinance
and
wouldn't
ranchers
matter.
are like insanely desirable.
Yeah,
But if you have an ordinance like ours, which is so broad and not specific, and had put all the properties in them,
Mhm.
none of those perks would have been in there, but they would have all been in our historic ordinance.
Mhm.
So the perks could have come later instead of doing it this way.
Gotcha.
So that's the difficulty that you have, to add them on now when the properties haven't even been put into the ordinance yet.
Mhm.
I don't see how you do perks for 80 structures that are all completely individual.
Mhm.
And that's why just having them
Yeah.
in there with the
Just having,
ordinance as it is, without the perks,
well,
would have
yes,
solved that.
and I think I've been on record of saying I thought that's how it should have been done, but that's not how it was done, so.
Yeah, but
So we don't have to
those are
rehash.
things, well, no, the county is interested. There's amendments you can do.
You know, with the exception of homes which are in the hands of developers or the one who keeps talking about, anyone living this wrong information about what
Mhm.
just now to reach. People. I think it would be very valuable because anybody who lives there willing to cope with another thing. Just because you love it, you know what I'm saying? That's why you're there. So of course it's different when a house is being neglected. It's a valuable piece of land. Commercial. More than that's.
And our homeowners are aging out. So we have many homeowners who own historic homes, because I visit them, I go door to door, and they're elderly or they're older, they've been there a long time and they loved it. And it's kept up, but it's a young person coming in isn't going to see
Yeah, and
maybe
that's,
the beauty of it. And so that is what I'm finding is the biggest problem when I do go out, because I'm visiting each one of them and taking new photographs and updating and talking to them. And
that's.
predominantly older.
And that's one of the reasons that doing it one at a time is the path of greatest resistance. Because instead of everybody coming in at once and having one shot to say yes or no, we're putting a shot to say yes or no in front of everyone every time.
But also some of the people that have done a nice restoration around historic property, like the one on Bishop Hollow, the people that were in here tonight, to have some type of accolade for them and recognition of what they did, that may be something, supportive just to share with other people to say, look, this is what before, the after, and just.
That's what we're doing with the Hayshams in our book for this year. That's why I'm taking photographs of the family, them and the builder, and
Nice.
at a stage maybe when they start building, and just to give people also an idea of who to hire
Mhm.
when you want to, because, some people aesthetics aren't, it's amazing, what people will put up and,
Aesthetics cost money.
I guess.
Right.
Not always. Smaller is sometimes you can be aesthetically pleasing and just not be grand.
I got you.
These days, anything,
Mhm.
not just the aesthetics.
All righty.
So yes, are we done?
We have not motioned to adjourn yet.
And I just want to say, thanks, Frank, for those reports. Those were great for the
Thank you.
property. So that was great.
Yeah, he does a
information.
great job.
I take the pictures one day right before the
Yes,
next.
I'm doing it
That's
too.
good.
I could do 100 of them, but they don't want them yet.
So, well,
You would.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I will second your motion to adjourn.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No one opposed.